Ladies and gentlemen, welcome along to Too Many Games. Today we continue in our video series on Epic Armageddon and we are looking at the second half of the Specialist Unit Special Rules. If you're interested in Epic Armageddon, then I suggest you check out the other videos that I've released so far going over the rules and how to play. Let's continue on with Specialist Units. So today we start with snipers. So firstly, when attacking with a sniper, roll separately from all other attacks. This is to make sure that we know if the sniper itself has caused a hit or not. Snipers are actually able to choose who is hit by their attack and therefore allocate the unit that they want to have their hit, provided they're still within range and line of fire. The unit that is allocated the hit will apply a -1 or -1 save modifier on their armor save when taking a hit from a sniper. And as you may expect, this can cause some questions to arise, so let's have a look at them. Can the sniper ability be used in an assault? And the answer is only if it's on an assault weapon or small arms weapon. So it depends on what your unit datasheet says, so refer back to the unit for that and follow those rules. What units may an attacker choose to hit with sniper hits in an assault? Any enemy units within 15 centimeters and in line of fire of the unit, regardless if the hit was from an assault weapon or a small arms weapon. So the sniper rule allows the hit to occur in that engagement range, regardless of whether it is a base-to-base assault weapon or a small arms weapon. Okay, a couple more questions on snipers still. When a sniper hit's allocated? And the answer is before or after regular hits, but before saving throws are made, and thus before macro weapon hits are allocated. So no issue as to when you do them, just as long as they're before macro weapon hits. Can a sniper hit be allocated to a unit that has already been allocated a regular hit? And the answer is yes. So this disobeys that general rule that we have of everyone taking a hit before receiving a second hit, and so on. Okay, let's look at Supreme Commanders. Supreme Commanders are generally your big bosses, your overall commanders and generals, the ones in charge of your entire army. Supreme Commanders count as commanders and leaders, so refer to those specialist unit rules. So they get that built in, essentially, so you won't see those rules listed next to a Supreme Commander, but just know they do have that. And each Supreme Commander will allow one reroll of a failed initiative test each turn. And this initiative test can be any type of initiative test. And what types are there? Well, we'll see in a minute. But this is a great rule, and there's usually a premium you pay to have a Supreme Commander in your force. So the FAQs for the Supreme Commander Specialist Unit. The first one is, can an army have more than one Supreme Commander? And the answer is yes, although the tournament army lists assume a maximum of one. So it depends how you play. I always follow the tournament rules, just so I think it's a more competitive environment. So no in our case, but if you play more casually or narratively, then you have that option there, provided your opponent's okay with that too, I dare say. What is an initiative test? An action or rally test. So very important to remember, a Supreme Commander helps activate troops, and you'll quite often remember that and use your reroll there, but also helps troops remove blast markers in a rally test, or perhaps more importantly, helps units rally when they are broken at the end of the turn. And this can be invaluable depending on the type of unit that is broken. So you may want to save your reroll, because you only get one per turn, for your rally phase, to help get that all-important unit back in control. Okay, so now onto thick rear armor. And very simply, with thick rear armor, units with thick rear armor ignore the -1 save modifier to their armor saves caused when caught in a crossfire. So they obviously still take any other consequences from crossfire, namely the additional blast marker that can apply, but it's nice and simple. Getting around behind them won't expose them to a worse armor save. Now let's look at teleporting units onto the battlefield. Formations where all units have the teleport special rule may be kept off the board at the start of the game. Important to note that everyone has to have this rule in the formation, so don't forget that. So this allows them to come onto the board via teleporting. So to do this, simply place the unit anywhere on the board at the start of any turn before the strategy roll occurs. So you don't know who's going to be taking that first activation potentially, and that's when you place. So there is some risk there. All units that are placed in this manner must be placed within 5 centimeters of another unit that has already been placed, with the exception of the very first unit, quite obviously, as they're the first one to go down. When placing units via teleport, be sure to place the units outside of any zone of control belonging to an enemy unit. If you decide to place them into dangerous terrain, which you can, then you must also take a dangerous terrain test for each unit placed this way. Regardless of this, for every unit that comes onto the board via teleport, you must roll a single d6. For every result of 1 that comes up, the formation that the unit belongs to receives a blast marker. So for example, 5 units teleporting in means you roll 5 d6. If you rolled 2 1s in those 5 dice, then you take 2 blast markers onto the formation. So just remember that when they come in, there is the risk that they will take some blast markers. FAQ time for teleporting onto the board. So let's have a look at these frequently asked questions. The first one is, can a formation that contains transport units with teleport and transported units without still teleport in? And the answer is yes, but any units that can't be transported should be considered destroyed. So teleporting transports is a thing in Epic Armageddon, which is pretty cool. Can a unit with teleport and scout teleport onto the board and set up within 20 centimeters from each other? And the answer is no. All units after the first need to be placed within 5 centimeters of a unit that has already been placed. So teleport overrides the scout special rule for the purposes of the initial placement of the formation. How many d6 should a war engine unit roll when it teleports into play? And the answer to that is a number equal to its starting damage capacity. This follows the general design principles for war engines, and we're going to see that soon in an upcoming video, hopefully. But just take this one on board for now, and it'll make more sense soon, hopefully. Okay, on to another simple one, again, for our special rules, and this time it's walkers. So this applies to things like dreadnoughts or Eldar war walkers, things like that. But there are a few units that might surprise you with the Walker Special rule, and units with the Walker Specialist rule are able to reroll failed dangerous terrain tests. Nothing else needed to be said there about how that works, but you just get that reroll. And this can turn up on units that seem like they might be tanks, like the Vindicator. I think it has the Walker Special rule off the top of my head, just to help it with the dangerous terrain tests. Okay, on to slow and steady. And this rule really only applies to spacecraft, which we will cover eventually in our video series. Some spacecraft are slow and steady, but not all. Those that are cannot be used on turns 1 and 2 of the battle, unless there's a scenario-specific rule that overrides that. So we'll learn more about this eventually, but not to be worried. Just know that the first 2 turns you can't use that spaceship. Let's look at support craft, and this is not a commonly found specialist unit, so forgiveness is generally granted if you forget how the rules work for it and have to refresh yourself when you come up against one. So support craft, they work in the same way as a skimmer. However, they are considered to be popped up all the time. This makes them more vulnerable to shooting and hiding, as it can be a lot more difficult for that, but they are fired at normally, and they fire normally. In assault, they always use their firefight value. They cannot choose to use close combat value, even if they're in base contact, so it's a bit different to regular skimmers. And any troops that embark or disembark from a support craft will do so normally. So in a question on support craft, can a unit with jump packs be placed within 15 centimeters when disembarked from a support craft? And the answer here is no. So pretty specific situation, but like I said, not often seen on the battlefield in most armies. So just refresh yourself with these rules if you use an army that makes use of them, or you fight regularly against them. On to Planetfall. So we're looking at another rule here generally involving spacecraft and aerospace rules. It represents units arriving from space, such as a transport craft, and self-planetfall is plotted in the same way as planetfall. So for more info on that, keep an eye out for a future video. This goes for both the turn selected and for the target location. So it's plotted in the same way as planetfall. However, it is different from planetfall in that it may be plotted even if the turn selected is when an enemy spacecraft is present in the battle. So it doesn't follow the normal rules for planetfall there. So a bit more on self-planetfall. On the designated turn, the self-planetfall unit is activated in the normal activation sequence. So just like another unit. How does this work? Nominate the action for the unit and roll to activate them. If it fails, their arrival is delayed until next turn, at which point you can try again. If it succeeds, place the unit at the plotted location and scatter like planetfall, including disembarking units up to 5 centimeters. After this, the formation's action proceeds as normal from that point on. So this means that the formation gets a free move from the planetfall placement at the beginning of its action, but activates normally after that. However, make sure you note the action is chosen at activation before scatter. Just remember, we will cover planetfall sooner or later, and this will make much more sense if you're not familiar with it at all. It can be a very powerful tool in your arsenal, particularly self-planetfall. Now let's look at everyone's favorite type of units, and that is expendable units. These are generally kind of your crappy cannon fodder type units like Grotz or Gretchen. A formation does not receive a blast marker when a unit with expendable is destroyed. So the benefit is basically it's extra hit points or health for the formation with less risk of causing the formation to break, so that's great. And this also includes the first casualty from crossfire or units being out of formation. So if you have a whole lot of expendable units get left behind, who cares? Along with this, weapons with disrupt do not cause a blast marker for hitting them. And we haven't looked at disrupt yet, but that'll be in our next video. But usually a disrupt weapon causes a blast marker just for hitting units rather than waiting for those units to be destroyed. So it doesn't matter what their armor save is and their roll for that. But it doesn't matter for your expendable units. They don't take that hit regardless. But if you happen to have a formation with only expendable units, then these bonuses from these rules do not apply. So it has to be a mixed unit to benefit. If they're all expendable, then you follow regular rules. You don't get these special ones. And although expendable units are essentially rubbish, they still count as casualties in assault. So them getting butchered by the enemy will still potentially cause you to lose and break from the assault. Now let's look at the rules for tunnelers. Now there are a number of rules for these types of specialist units, but generally these units again are not that common, so no pressure on you to know them all off by heart. Formations with all units having the tunneler rule may be set up off the board to appear on turn 2 or after. So unlike something like teleport, which can be on turn 1, you must not bring them out on that first turn. Just imagine they're a little bit delayed because they're digging their way under the board. You set up with spacecraft at the start of the game on the table's edge, and any transported units in the tunnelers should also be set aside too. So you are allowed to transport units when doing a tunneler style deployment, which is great news for anyone interested. Write down the location of where tunnelers will surface when you set up drop zone locations for spacecraft. And this is similar to something like Planetfall, but essentially you are predetermining where they will arrive on a later turn before you even start the game. So continuing on with tunnelers, secretly record when the tunneler will turn up. Make sure that this is not known by your opponent. This is a secret, but make sure you write it down. Now, what turn can you bring it on? Well, that depends on where you have selected to bring it on. So if it's on your half, then it can come on from turn 2 onwards. However, if it's on your opponent's half, then it has to be turn 3 and onwards. And again, just imagine they have to tunnel a bit further, so it takes them a little bit longer. But take this into consideration when choosing your location, because it might be tempting to put it right in the back line, but it could be out of the game for that pivotal turn 2, if you choose that. Surface and place the units at the start of the turn chosen, and do this before teleport troops are placed on the board. This placement does not trigger Overwatch, so that's great to know. You're not going to get shot by that. However, if you decide to disembark troops, that will trigger Overwatch as normal. And lastly, on tunnelers, if a tunneler surfaces on impassable terrain, under a friendly unit, or in an enemy zone of control, then the opposing player places the formation to the nearest area it can surface. So you don't lose them, you don't take damage, etc., but your opponent places them and does so in a way that's as close as possible to where they were trying to aim for. Formations with multiple tunnelers place all additional tunnelers within the normal 5 centimeter placement of other units in the formations, and all tunnelers must be within 15 centimeters of the location they entered. So essentially, picture there's an entrance point to the board, maybe like a big hole would be helpful to imagine that they burst through, and everyone has to be placed within 15 centimeter range of it. So you can't spread out into a big chain. Tunnelers and units being transported may take an action on the turn they surface, so it doesn't mess with your activation with them. And that is everything you could ever have wanted to know about tunnelers in Epic Armageddon, and amazingly, we have no FAQs for them, so that's good news. Well, we made it once again to the end of another video in our Epic Armageddon series. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video as we wrapped up the specialist unit special rules. If you missed the first part, make sure to go back and watch it. It was quite long, but you know, like I said, it adds a lot of variety to the game. There's lots of rules to remember and to get familiar with, but honestly, they keep Epic Armageddon fresh and interesting even after you've been playing it for years. Our next video will be looking at specialist weapons, and this is one of the more exciting topics, but it's not that long, so please check it out. Feel free to subscribe or like, and stick with us for the rest of the series. I'll try to respond to any comments that you have as well. See you next time on Too Many Games.